The last time I reviewed a Yunzii keyboard, it was this, the B75 Pro. It typed well, but it had a slew of potential deal breakers that made it less than stellar in my view. When Yunzii then reached back out about the possibility of sending over their AL68, I'll admit I was a bit hesitant. Then I noticed it had some blue keycaps and a full aluminum frame, and I said, how bad could it be? Well, I'm actually happy to report that it's a very different story this time around, though there are some different issues that you won't want to miss. But before we jump into that, I do want to reiterate that Yunzii did send this over for review, though they had no say in the contents of the review. And kudos to them for continuing to support a channel even when I didn't provide the most glowing review ever. In this video, you'll get the full details about this 65% keyboard, including a full typing test, an interesting experience with the battery, and some concerns about Yunzii's pricing practices. So go ahead and practice hitting that subscribe button, because all that starts right now. Beginning with the build and design, this 65% keyboard is solid, quite literally. Despite its small size, it weighs in at just under 1,200 grams or just over 2.5 pounds. This full aluminum frame is beautiful, albeit heavy, and maybe it's just the fact that I recently reviewed the rather sharp edges of the low free flow, but I really in particular like the way that they cut these edges. They're so nice, they feel great, and they look awesome. Now, a 65% keyboard is very similar to a 60% keyboard, so there's no number pad on the side and there's no function row across the top. What it adds compared to a 60 degree though is this extra row along the side, which includes a volume knob as well as page up, page down, and delete. I quite like this setup. The right shift key isn't cramped as it can be on some 60% models. There's also a small space next to the arrows to help you find them more easily by touch. I also like the location of the delete key, and the knob is very solid. You can get this board in either this silver color or a black color, and each one comes with some extra keycaps to add a little variety to those colors. Obviously, I immediately put on the dark blue escape key, the dark blue arrow keys, and the light blue enter key. The original all gray look is clean, but I obviously love any keyboard with a little bit of my favorite color blue. And with the blue keycaps on, this keyboard has a lot of character and looks really nice. In addition to the colored keycaps, there's also Mac keycaps, which you can swap in place of the Windows-specific ones that come pre-installed. The typing angle is right around 6 to 7 degrees, though the angle of the keys make it feel a little bit more flat than that. On the bottom, there's no adjustable feet to change the typing angle, just some small rubberized feet to prevent slipping. However, this thing probably isn't really going to go anywhere sheerly based on the weight alone. Also on the bottom is a cool mirror detail with a mountain on it. I still don't fully understand decorations on the bottom of a keyboard since they don't get seen in regular use, but it's still pretty cool. Overall, this is a simple but beautiful keyboard that sits comfortably between a clean professional look and a fun gaming keyboard look. It's right there in the middle, suiting both audiences. Typing on the AL68 is decent. The keycaps are double shot PBT, which is nice for longevity as they should hold up to shine over time. They're unfortunately the same keycaps that were on the previous Yunzii keyboard that I reviewed. This means that they have the same issues with font and with the arrows throughout the keyboard that I didn't really like then. I also don't like the shape of these keycaps. I find that they're really this old school shape for a keycap. My biggest issue with them is that they have just this really small surface area for typing on the top. They taper upwards and then have a half pipe-like shape that sticks up on either side. So the smooth typing area on the top of the key is super small compared to many more modern keycaps out there that have much larger typing areas and more gentle concave shapes that help guide your fingers. Switches for the keyboard are available in either Cocoa Cream V2 or Milk V2, both of which are linear options, and all of the boards are hot swappable. I've got the Cocoa Cream switches on this board, so let's give them a listen. The typing feel with these linear switches is very smooth. It doesn't require much force at all for actuation. Because of that light feel of the switches, you wind up bottoming them out pretty hard in most instances. This results in a feeling that's really punchy when you're using it, kind of like you're popping away at an old school typewriter or something like that. The primary word I'd use to describe the sound of this keyboard is clacky. Each keystroke has a very defined sound to it. The pitch is just a little bit higher than I'd like, and the sound volume is also quite loud. The result is that this keyboard has a high likelihood of disturbing neighbors if you're using it around others. The sound is somewhere between a pleasant sound and one that bothers me. Some days I find that I like it a lot, other days it sounds too loud and winds up annoying me. My wife, on the other hand, came and hit about 2 keys and immediately said, nope, since she's quite sensitive to loud keyboards. I'm curious what you think of this typing test, since I'm a little on the fence. Give me a word or a phrase in the comments you'd use to describe the sound. From a functionality and features perspective, this keyboard has everything you might look for. It has full south-facing RGB backlighting with lots of different light patterns, though you should note that the keycaps are not shine-through for those that find that to be important. There is also a small light bar that is in the gap between the right control key and the arrow keys. Overall, the lighting makes for a pretty fun design. If you're not a backlighting person though, you can turn it off by fully dimming the main lights with function plus the arrow key, and you can turn off the light bar with function plus page down. You can also toggle all of the lights on and off with function plus backspace, but doing that actually results in them turning back on when you turn the keyboard off and then turn it back on. So just dimming them is the better way to keep it off permanently if you're anti-backlighting. Now the key layout is fairly standard for a 65% keyboard, but here's just a few things to note. On the right side of the space bar, there are only 2 keys. You've got a function key and a right control key. This means that there isn't another Alt or Command key, as there will often be on other keyboards. On the far right side of the board, they have the page up and page down buttons, but no home or end. Finally, there is the knob. I wasn't a fan of the knob on the previous Yunzii keyboard that I took a look at, but this one is solid. It has a good amount of resistance as you turn it, and each one of those tactile turns is exactly corresponding to 1 jump up or down of volume on my Mac. This is so much more useful than the ones where turning the knob 1 time results in it going 2 up or 2 down, and it can wind up becoming a bit of a battle between you and the device to try and get the volume that you actually want. You can also mute or unmute your volume with a click of the knob, which feels pretty satisfying. And finally, you can press and hold the knob in order to switch it over to an RGB controller. This is the best knob that I've used in a while. Now, when you go with a small keyboard like this, I assume that most people won't be using traditional function row commands. However, there are still some combinations with the function button and the number row if you need them. I'll put them up on the screen so that you can see what's available. The good news is that this keyboard is QMK and VIA compatible, so you can edit any of these functions as well as the rest of the board setup if you need to. You can also use it to add in macros, adjust the RGB, or do whatever else you desire. It is very nice to see QMK showing up on more and more keyboards lately. Connectivity hits everything you'd like to see. The keyboard works with both Mac and Windows, though switching between the two requires the use of key commands. Interestingly, the AL66, a slightly different keyboard than this, includes a Windows and Mac toggle switch on the back, but this one does not have that. I'd love to see that switch added to all of the boards, as it makes it a lot easier than remembering function A and function S to swap between operating systems. Even now that I remember them, your guess is as good as mine which one is which, but I'll put it here just so that you know. You can connect up to 3 devices via Bluetooth, which can be swapped using function plus Q, W, and E. You can also use function plus R to connect to the included 2.4 gig USB receiver, which slots in magnetically on the back of the board when it is not in use. And finally, there is a wired mode that you can use with the USB-C port on the back. The included USB-A to USB-C cable is basic, but it'll do the job. When using Bluetooth, the wake up from sleep is a bit on the slow side. However, the keyboard takes a longer than average time to actually go to sleep, so it didn't wind up being a problem like it has been on some other keyboards I've tested. Throughout testing, my Bluetooth connection was very stable and I didn't run into any real connection issues. Although the sleep to wake settings weren't an issue for me, they do come into play with the battery, especially if you use the RGB backlighting. Since it takes a while to go into sleep mode, the lighting will stay on for a while when it's not actually in use, which will cause the battery to drain more quickly. That now brings us to the battery, which is an interesting topic. The keyboard has an astoundingly large 6,000 milliamp hour battery, which is the biggest battery I've seen on a keyboard to date. I've previously been happy to report on 4,000 milliamp hour models, but this takes that to a whole new level. Additionally, I love the function that they now include, where pressing the function button and the right control button shows you the battery percentage lighting up across the number row. So if it's lit all the way up to the 7, you know you've got 70% remaining. That is incredibly handy and pretty intuitive. It was actually a feature on the other Yunzii keyboard, but didn't actually work on my model, which I called out in my review. However, now comes my experience with the battery. 6,000 milliamp hours on a small board like this without a ton of backlighting should last for a really long time. But in their advertising, they only claim 96 hours with RGB off and 36 hours with RGB on. This would mean that you'd probably have to charge this keyboard every single week if you're using backlighting. The battery performance of a keyboard is always going to be a little bit of a trade-off. For example, if your keyboard goes to sleep more quickly, it will preserve battery, but it may degrade the user experience. If you make it better for users by preventing it from going to sleep, like this board does, it may die more quickly. Only getting a handful of days out of a 6,000 milliamp hour battery feels pretty unoptimized to me. What's worse is that when testing my keyboard, it actually seemed to die even more quickly than that. Like, it was going strong, it was around 60 to 70%, and then poof, it was dead. I then recharged it fully, and within just about an hour, it was already down to 80% remaining. Eventually, I decided to open the keyboard up to see what was going on. What I found was that there's not actually a 6,000 milliamp hour battery. There's two 3,000 milliamp hour ones. Though the text can be a little bit hard to read and it's mostly in Chinese, I'm pretty sure that it's clear that they are both 3,000 milliamp hours, adding up to that 6,000 total. Eventually, I found what I think was my issue. It looked like one of the batteries was not actually fully connected. So I fully seated the cable, sealed the board back up, and kept testing. I'm happy to report that after that fix, the battery seemed to behave better than advertised and much better than my previous testing. So I'm assuming that that was the cause of my initial poor experience. Now, hopefully you don't have to open up your board and this was just a one-off situation, but I always want to share what I experience and what you know you might have to expect. All right, let's talk about pricing, which I'll warn you is a can of worms. Now, going into this, I already had an understanding that the MSRP shown on Yunzii's website wasn't really a real MSRP. You'd be hard-pressed to find anything on their site that shows at full price, whether you're looking at a time like Black Friday, where there's lots of deals, or just some random Tuesday. There's nothing inherently wrong with that approach. Some brands just want to make it seem like you're getting a deal every single time. However, based on making this video around the Black Friday holiday and the associated sales, I noticed some things with pricing that I just have to call out. The keyboard was on sale during Black Friday for $88, which was shown as a discount off of the original $110. As of the time of filming, you can see this board listed on their website for $110. That's all fine. Charging MSRP now that the sales are done makes total sense. However, now the original price is listed as $125. Now that behavior right there is the definition of markup to markdown, and it is designed to manipulate customers into believing that they're receiving a better deal than they actually are. After all, this was selling for $88 previously, it's now selling for $110. It's not still on sale. You're selling it for full price. Unfortunately, I did not take a screenshot of that pricing beforehand, as I didn't expect that I was going to need to. However, just to prove it out, using the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine, we can see firsthand on the Yunzii product page, their own website, that this behavior is taking place. While my exact model is not showing up on the page, a very similar one, the AL66, is. So, as you can see on this screen from October 7th, this keyboard shows a current price of $65, marked down from $95. When we look at the site today, the same keyboard is actually priced higher than the aforementioned original price, showing $100 marked down from $105. By contrast, the AL71 looks more natural. It was also selling for $65 during the holiday sales, marked down from $132, which is a heck of a discount. When we move to today, the price has gone up to $95, with the MSRP remaining at $132. In this instance, you could totally debate whether the $132 price is valid or not, but at least it is a stable number that represents an unchanging metric upon which to judge the discount and the current pricing. Considering these few examples, best case scenario, there's some sort of issue on the back end of their site causing these prices to fluctuate in a way that they don't actually intend to do. Worst case scenario, they are intentionally misrepresenting pricing in an attempt to trick consumers into thinking they're receiving a better deal than they actually are. It's honestly annoying to me, and it makes me hesitate on whether or not to give Yunzii any more coverage on this channel. And it's also super frustrating to have this clutter a review of what is genuinely a pretty solid keyboard that at times can be had for a pretty good price. Even before I deliver my final verdict and give you my differentiators and deal breakers, I'd love to get your opinion on whether I should cover additional Yunzii products in the future or whether I should only cover brands which maintain more honest and transparent pricing practices. So please let me know in the comments what you genuinely think so that I can help make a decision that honors your wishes rather than just the thoughts that I have on the situation. I always want this channel to be somewhere where you feel like you can trust the information that you're getting and know that the brands I cover are not intentionally trying to rip you off. So please comment what you think. All right, so in conclusion, I guess, of pricing, this keyboard can range from $88 to $110 and possibly more if the MSRP that's currently on there is to be believed. I think this keyboard is actually a pretty solid value for a full-featured and full aluminum keyboard. It checks so many of the boxes that keyboard enthusiasts look for, and most of the things that are drawbacks are really just subjective in nature. The differentiators for this keyboard include a solid aluminum build and a nice clean design. Bonus points for having a colorway that I really love. The knob is solid and works considerably better than the previous Yunzii board that I tested. The battery is absolutely massive, though there might be some problems with it. Connectivity has everything you could want, and the sleep to wake is acceptable. There's PBT keycaps and RGB backlighting, and last but not least, they have QMK compatibility to make this keyboard more your own. This is a formidable list of positives for a keyboard. On the potential deal breaker side of things, the biggest one is going to be loud typing. If I use this thing anywhere near my wife, she's going to immediately throw me out of the room. It's not a sound that people will want to be around. There's no adjustable feet, so you're limited to a single typing angle. There is a slight concern with build quality with my strange battery issue, though that could have simply happened during shipping. You also may not like the pricing practices. Finally, the keycaps have numerous challenges, including a less than desirable shape and angle, poor font design, and no shine through. It's important to call out that pretty much all these deal breakers are subjective and may not be an issue for you at all, but for some, they may rule this board out altogether. If you can look past those select few deal breakers, there is a ton to love about this keyboard. For a full aluminum case, available around or even below $100, I think a lot of you out there could be really happy with the Yunzii AL68. If you'd like to pick one up for yourself, there is an affiliate link down in the video description. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.